Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and today we will be doing a debrief follow-up to the re-release of Erika's story. And for those of you who have not heard Erika's story yet, she was raised in a really strict religious environment where women were taught to submit, to serve, and to see their worth through becoming wives and mothers. And when she spoke up as a young adult, she was cut off from her family and community and became homeless. Her first long-term relationship, Erika tried really hard to build a family and keep it together, even while carrying most of the responsibility. She worked, she parented, she managed the home, and ignored a lot of painful behavior because she wanted stability, belonging, and family. There was alcohol use, drug use, sexual pressure, financial irresponsibility, and a real lack of real partnership going on. But the main part of Erika's story was the second relationship, which we focused on. And at first, the abuser seemed to offer what Erika had been missing. He appeared stable. He appeared capable, financially responsible, and involved with kids. But very quickly, this relationship became about controlling her, and it became very, very dangerous. And Erika describes sexual coercion, intimidation, weapons, stalking, isolation, financial abuse. There was surveillance going on, and then control through children, pets, money, the home, and then the legal system. And over time, she kept functioning, parenting, and just trying to get through every single day. She was just surviving. And a major turning point came when she tried to get legal help. She went to an attorney's office, but her husband had already contacted that office, which meant that they could not represent her. And that attorney sent her to a crisis center. And during that intake, Erika was asked direct questions about abuse, whether he had used weapons, whether there was sexual coercion, if he controlled money, all of these things. And she just kept on answering yes to these things. And this was the moment where Erika realized that she had been abused and that she was in a situation where she wasn't really seeing her as being this abuse victim. And it was a shock to her, even though she was living through it, that this was her life. And unfortunately, leaving did not end the abuse. Erika then faced legal abuse, court battles, a lot of financial strain, custody issues, post-separation types of control. And her abuser continues to use the systems that were there in place against her, other people, and the children to stay connected to her life and to try to punish her for leaving. So this debrief of Erika's episode will look at the big themes of Erika's story. And after that, we will be going through the fear, obligation, guilt, and shame that kept Erika in this relationship longer, kept the control in place. But before we get to any of that, if you want to be a guest on our show like Erika was many years ago, go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com, click on the guest form, fill out the form, and press the submit button, and we will go from there. Also, if you want to join our support group, we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday night, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights, and we have forum boards for you to post on to get the validation that you need from survivors just like you. So click on the support group button at narcissistapocalypse.com. Plus, we have a newsletter at our website, and if you join our newsletter, you get a new workbook for every new survivor story that comes out that week. So join our newsletter today. Everything is at narcissistapocalypse.com. So now we will discuss our first big theme. And our first theme is the early conditioning that Erika went through and the submission that was taught to her in this time. So for Erika, she was raised in this strict religious environment where submission was presented as part of being a good woman, a good wife, and a good mother. She was taught to serve, stay quiet, defer to men, and understand her value through these family roles. Erika was already taught that her needs come last, so an abuser might not have to work very hard to make someone like Erika ignore their needs when this is what they've been taught their whole entire life. So if someone is taught that obedience is love, control may not immediately register as being dangerous. So in Erika's story, this conditioning really helped create a framework where she kept trying to serve, hold the family together, and absorb more than anyone should really have to absorb. And the abuser was able to exploit her beliefs. And this is common in coercive control. Abusers use a victim's existing values against them, their existing beliefs against them. And they use loyalty, faith, motherhood, forgiveness, family, and responsibility as big pressure points. And those values may be meaningful to the victim, but in the hands of an abuser, they become tools of control. And the second big takeaway here, the big theme, is the financial abuse that went on. And with Erika, money affected her ability to protect herself, get legal help, maintain stability, and separate safely. So the financial abuse here really continues after this relationship is over. Court costs, attorney's fees, repeated legal conflict, and the burden of defending herself kept her financially tied to this abuse. They were using the abuser, as a form of financial abuse. And this is one of the reasons post-separation abuse can be devastating. And right here with Erika's story, money was not just money. It was access, it was mobility, it was legal protection, it was housing, it was the ability to make choices. And even in the aftermath, when they're free, here it is very restricted still because of this financial abuse that through the court system and everything legally that's going on afterwards, that this abuser is creating control and keeping Erika trapped long after this relationship is over. And another big takeaway or theme here is sexual coercion and body control. So sexual coercion inside a relationship or marriage is minimized in a huge way. And a lot of people are treating this as a private marital problem. But because they are in a relationship, it still does not mean that Erika and others have consented to this. Marriage does not erase body autonomy, and a person still has the right to say no. A person has the right to choose what happens to their body. And when someone uses pressure, fear, intimidation, entitlement, or force to override that choice, that is abuse. And in coercive control, sex can become one more area where the abuse victim is denied ownership over themselves. So the victim may comply because saying no feels unsafe. They may dissociate to get through what is happening. They may later feel shame about the things that they were pressured into. And they may struggle to name the experience because it happens inside this relationship where they were already being told they owed the other person access to everything, including their body. And this is assault, this is control, and this is abuse. And then another big takeaway, key theme of the story here for Erika is surveillance, stalking, and the loss of privacy. Erika describes being monitored through baby monitors, electronics, phone records, tracking devices, being followed. And surveillance is not only about collecting information, it is about changing the survivor, the victim's behavior by making them feel watched. So when a victim believes that they are being monitored, privacy starts to disappear. Conversations no longer feel private. Movement no longer feels private. Attempts to seek help may not feel private. Even thinking about leaving can feel dangerous because the victim may believe that the abuser will find out. So this is a huge damaging effect of surveillance because it's teaching the victim here to censor themselves before the abuser even says anything or even has proof of anything. So they might stop calling people, stop writing things down, stop searching for resources, stop telling the truth, or stop acting naturally inside their own home. And I know a lot of you out there feel that way right now or have gone through this. And for Erika, surveillance really helped create the sense that he could reach into every part of her life. So it was a way of really saying, you are not separate from me. You do not get any privacy. You do not get your own reality. And I can find out what you are doing, anything you are doing. And this is a serious form of control, because at this point, he's watching, but then there's the self-censoring and making herself smaller and smaller. Isolation starts to occur here, and she starts to do the work for this person. And for a lot of you out there, this is happening to you or happened to you, and it's a huge thing, and it's scary and it's dangerous, and it's hard to leave, with all these things going on, because it's really in your head at this point that even thinking it, as I stated before, that they'll find out, and that's just scary. And then the next thing on our list is survival mode. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the crisis center moment in this story and the recognition of what Erika was going through. So when you're in survival mode, you are just getting through the day. You are surviving. And for many of you, you are compartmentalizing a lot of things. You could be very high functioning. You may not notice things as being abuse, or you've hidden these things even from yourself. So for Erika, when she gets to this crisis center, this moment here is huge. Erika is asked direct questions about abuse. She has to answer yes again and again and again. And these are questions about weapons, sexual coercion, money, all of these things, everything that had been happening to her. And before this moment, many parts of the abuse for Erika, and I'm sure for a lot of you out there, she had compartmentalized these things. Everything became separate. There was a money issue. It was a sex issue. It was a parenting issue. Everything had been compartmentalized and put into their box. And she was not letting anything attach to each other. But at the crisis center, those pieces all came into place at one time, and everything got categorized as abuse. And that is why there's a line that she states, but that's not me. Because she didn't see herself in that way. She'd been in survival mode. She'd been in survival mode her whole life, really. And she'd been complying in the way that she was supposed to exist, the way she was taught. In this relationship, again, she's doing her obligations to certain things. Everything's getting compartmentalized. And she doesn't realize that this abuse had actually taken place. And many survivors have an image in their mind of what an abuse victim looks like, and they don't want to see themselves in that image. And for a lot of people, you're capable. Erika was capable. She's doing so many things: educated, responsible, functional. You might also think that you're too aware to be abused, but anyone can be abused. You're not the one abusing yourself. Someone has chosen to do that to you. So for Erika and many of you out there, abuse here wasn't matching what she thought in her mind she should be looking like, because she was so functional in so many ways. And sometimes an abuse victim doesn't want to say that they are being abused, but this is abuse. And recognition can bring relief sometimes, but it also can bring a giant shock, shame, and it can force the abuse victim to really face how much they had to minimize and compartmentalize in order to keep going. And it's really hard to deal with if this was going on with you. My heart goes out to everyone who was dealing with this, who's just surviving and not seeing themselves and then getting that shock. And there could be a lot of shame that comes attached to that as well. And then the last one on our list here of key themes was the legal abuse and post-separation control. And the legal abuse is just another big part of Erika's story. Her experience shows how control can continue after leaving. So with this, a lot of people don't understand. They think that once the relationship is over, that the abuse is over, that the coercive control is over. But with legal abuse and post-separation control, the abuser can still put their tentacles into everything. And leaving doesn't mean that abuse might be gone. The abuse might just change form. And so once the abuser no longer has the same access inside the home, they can use the court, custody, attorneys, money, paperwork, visitation, and the legal system can become another huge arena where this control is performed. And with Erika's story, the abuse was really treated at times like a normal divorce or ordinary conflict, even though there was a larger pattern of coercive control going on. And this is one of the biggest problems that victims face. Systems try to flatten out abuse into two people who cannot get along. And when that happens, the abuser in this situation really benefits because the context and the nuance of everything here disappears. So abuse is just draining. It will drain you financially, emotionally, and physically, and it can keep a abuse victim tied to the abuser for years and years and years. It can also make them look reactive because they are constantly being forced to respond, even though they're just in self-defense mode. And it's a sad state of affairs that we are still in this place. And for those of you that are going through this, again, my heart goes out to you all. And then up next, we have the fear, obligation, guilt, and shame of Erika's story and how these things kept her there. So fear, number one on our list, fear was one of the primary ways Erika was controlled. The fear in her story begins to organize their life around prevention, trying to prevent accusations, trying to prevent punishment, trying to prevent any escalations, trying to prevent financial retaliation, trying to prevent harm to the children. These things are going on. Plus, there was this fear for her life. So there's these real big fears of what will happen, in the relationship to kind of keep her quiet, more compliant, but also fears of what will happen outside of the relationship if she's gone and what's going to keep her there. The fears for her children, the fears of financial instability, all these things are going into this. So fear here, like with Erika and other victims, they learned, the consequences of what happens when you resist. So the abuser may not need to make a direct threat every single time. Once the abuse victim understands what can happen, fear really begins to do the work in advance. And the abuse victim here may stay quiet, give in, avoid asking questions, stop seeking help, delay leaving because of the consequences, feeling too dangerous. And with Erika's story, fear was not only about what had already happened, was also about what could happen next. And that uncertainty really kept her trapped in this relationship for a long time, and for a lot of you out there as well. And then we have obligation. And obligation in Erika's story was just another part of the control. Some of Erika's obligation came from her early religious conditioning. She'd been taught to see herself through the roles of wife, mother, helper, caretaker, and someone who was really just supposed to submit. So those beliefs made leaving more complicated because leaving could feel like violating the role that she had been trained to fulfill. And then obligation can sound reasonable when it is removed from the abuse. So keep the family together, be a good wife, be a good mother, forgive, be patient, try harder. And in Erika's story, obligation really kept her trying to manage the relationship, protect the children, preserve stability, and endure more than she should have had to endure. And this is how obligation becomes control. It convinced Erika and other victims that leaving is a moral failure instead of a safety decision. And then we have the guilt in Erika's story. So a huge guilt in Erika's story was the managing of him, the managing of the abuser. He could blame his behavior on his military background, his past, his parents, his trauma, and then she was asked to understand him instead of protecting herself. His explanations gave her a reason to stay a little longer. Erika starts thinking, he has these issues. He has been struggling. Maybe he does need support. Maybe if I understand him better, things would improve. That kind of guilt becomes very powerful because it is turning Erika's life in a victim's life into the caretaker of the person who is hurting them. And later, guilt attached itself to the way she tried to escape. So Erika talked about doing things she was not proud of because she was trying to get away. There was guilt involved in that. And that's huge because survivors, victims do not always leave in this clean, simple, easy to explain way. Sometimes they're trapped, monitored, financially controlled, isolated, and afraid. And under those conditions, you have to kind of figure out what strategies will work and what you can do at what possible time. And within that, you might do things that you might not have normally done. You might have acted in a way you might not normally have. You might have, tricked the abuser and thought terrible about that. And you might have guilt about that. You might have guilt doing that during it. Some people I've talked to before, they just could never even come to do those things at all because there was too much guilt about what that would say about them. They couldn't do that to the other person. So for Erika here, guilt was part of the control. It kept her focused on his explanations, and it made her ask, what should I have done better, instead of keeping the focus where it belonged, which is on the person who's creating this danger in the first place. And then we have the shame in Erika's story. And shame really made it hard for Erika to not see herself as, quote unquote, an abused person. And that crisis center moment that we discussed earlier shows this pretty clearly. When she was asked the questions about all of these different things that were happening to her, her response still was, "That's not me." And as we said, she was compartmentalizing and seeing things as separate. But that line also carries shame. It's shame and disbelief that are working together there. She could recognize the facts, but accepting those facts, like describing her life, meant facing something very painful about everything that had happened to her, from the violations, all of the control, and all the danger that she was in. And part of that was the sexual coercion carrying shame. So a lot of these shames here for Erika are keeping her quiet. And it's a lot to deal with. These types of shames, including the sexual shames, can really silence abuse victims because they feel embarrassed. They feel like they've gone along with it for so long, and there's a shame and embarrassment of that. And then there's also shame about needing help, and Erika had been the responsible one for a very long time. She worked, she parented, managed, she survived, kept everything going, and she was used to being the one who carried things. So admitting that there was a need for outside intervention meant that she's facing a reality that did not match the image of being this capable, strong person in control, which is why that crisis center moment mattered so much when she says, "But that's not me." So that was our fear, obligation, guilt, and shame of Erika's story. And now we're going to go to the things that I want for Erika going forward. And number one, I want for Erika peace that does not have to be defended every day. I want Erika to have a life where safety is not something she has to fight for, prove, or constantly protect from an abuser's next move. 2, I want a strong sense of ownership over herself again, her body, her privacy, her home, her money, her voice, and her identity. I want them all to belong to her again, and I want her to keep feeling that more deeply every single day. And then the last one here, I want Erika to heal without shame. Everything here became a really big shock in that moment at the community center. So I want Erika to be able to look at everything, look at every piece of her story, including the parts that were confusing and painful or hard to explain, without blaming herself for just trying to survive and being in survival mode for so long. So that is the debrief of Erika's story, and I hope that you found this episode useful. I hope that you found some insights in here that can be helpful for you and validating for you. And if you want to be a guest like Erika was on our Survivor Story episodes, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Click on the guest form button, fill out the form, press the submit button, and we will go from there. And that is it for this debrief, for this follow-up episode. And I hope you have a good night.